if you're not acting on your survey feedback in real time, you're not getting the most out of your voice of the customer program. And alerts are really the way to help you do that.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to PeopleMetrics Live. In today's session, we're going to be showing you the best 3 voice of customer or VOC alerts and how to use them. Kirk and Audrey, let's get right into it.
Yeah, so I don't know if you've been on our other PeopleMetrics Live sessions, but we've talked about a lot of different things, and we started really broad. We talked about the difference between market research and voice of customer programs, and now we're deep into the customer voice of customer space, and we want to talk more about alerts and how you use them. And so if you're not acting on your survey feedback in real time, you're not getting the most out of your voice of the customer program. And alerts are really the way to help you do that. But I want to back way up so that we're all on the same page and to talk about what is an alert. And Kirk, I know you have a lot of experience with that. Do you want to define it for us and kind of explain what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Audrey really touched on the key part there of if you're not acting on your survey feedback in real time, then you're not getting the most out of it. And alerts are notifications to your team about survey feedback that needs immediate responses, immediate feedback in real time. Kind of at a broad level, whenever you're fielding a survey, you're going to take action in 2 ways. One is at the aggregate level of we're getting an overall sense of our customer base. What's the overall NPS of all of our customers and how can we better serve them? That's the aggregate. Then at the individual level, you're going to say, I have one customer who gave me this feedback, who told me their net promoter score. And if it's low, or if there's something they indicated in the survey that you needed to follow up on, an alert is a notification to really focus on that high priority and then take action on that individual feedback.
Great. Yeah, exactly. And so at PeopleMetrics, what we do is when we receive a survey response that has that specific alert trigger, so say it's a lower NPS, it's someone who's a detractor. What we'll do is when we get that completed survey response that has a detractor score, we send out an email notification to a defined group of people. Our clients determine who it should go to. And in that notification, it has who the respondent was, what their experience was, their full survey response, and hopefully their contact information so that you are able to reach out directly and in as real time as possible right after they submitted their survey and deal with the alert. Now, I am talking mostly about a recover alert when you want to get to that customer as soon as possible, but we're going to talk about some other kind of alerts that we really recommend you use as well. I also know that, Kirk, a couple of years ago, I think, or maybe more recently, you did some analysis about how alerts work and the impact that they might have.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really, all of this is around, well, what's the importance of this? Why should we do this in the first place? And the reason, of course, in customer feedback, the importance of this is that it has an impact on customer retention. It has an impact on their future spend and loyalty with their company. As an analyst at PeopleMetrics, one of the things I used to do was I would do an analysis on customers who had provided an alert for any number of things. We'll get into the details, but there can be any number of reasons you want to follow up on a survey response, whether it's either someone who's extremely dissatisfied or satisfied. But I would do feedback on these customers who received an alert. And what I found from this analysis was that if there was a follow-up process in place, if we acted on these alerts, those customers where we acted on these alerts were more likely to have retained with the company, they were less likely to have turned, and it was more likely that they had higher spend in kind of later iterations of the survey. So if you're acting on that individual feedback in real time, you're going to see benefits to customer retention and customer spend later on.
So a big part of defining a voice of the customer program is deciding what your alert triggers are and then who the alert should go to. And I think a way to help you understand how that would work and what you should do is for us to talk about our most commonly used types of alerts, and why we think they're important. So here at PeopleMetrics, we have 3 that we're going to talk about today. The first one I did mention a moment ago, and it's called a recover alert. And what that is if you have a customer who might have had a bad experience or had an issue or had something that didn't go so well for them in their interaction with your company, and they call it out on their survey response, you want to know about it. Now, Kirk talked about you look at survey data in aggregate so you can make big decisions, but every customer is important. And so if somebody has an experience that was less than stellar and they're telling you about it, you need to know. And so what we do is we send an alert, what we call a recover alert. I gave an example of a recover alert trigger that could be a low NPS. It could be something that someone said they had a problem, or their perception of your company has decreased over time. Anything that is indicating that they are not having a good experience and that you reaching out to them may be able to turn that around. Yeah, go ahead, Kirk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to that recover alert, the purpose of it really is, as the name implies, to recover from a customer issue that has occurred. So we've had customers that have kind of varying definitions as to what counts as a recover alert. Most commonly, it is exactly as Audrey said, going to be a lower NPS that requires follow-up, or a customer that indicates a problem that can also add to it. Some customers also include sort of key milestones within that. So for instance, if the product wasn't delivered as promised, and that can all feed into a recovered alert. The point is, something has happened that requires recovery, and that is the purpose and the trigger of it, and then ultimately kind of what that alert is driving towards.
Now, there's a number of different ways that companies can choose to manage alerts once they get them, and I think maybe that should be like a whole separate topic that we can talk about a different time. But today, I do have a client who does a really good job specifically with recover alerts. They decided to have a centralized team manage them. So they have a team of full-time people who call every single detractor who submits a survey response with a 0 to 6 NPS, so that they can try and recover that customer. And they do that because they've found that there really is a return on the investment of that full-time team, and they've been able to increase customer lifetime value over time, because anytime somebody has an interaction that they are not happy with, this centralized team is reaching out to them. They make 3 attempts to contact every person who triggers a recover alert.
Yeah, and I think one thing I would note on that is really important is, this company picked to have a dedicated team for it, regardless of whether it's a dedicated team or if it's the account manager for that account or if it's an existing team. You want to have someone who is responsible for these alerts. Surveys are essentially another touch point for your company, where you are reaching out to them, collecting their feedback, and a customer is saying something back to you. You don't want to have a survey result come back to you and it's ambiguous or unsure internally who is responsible for this, who should act on this. So you may have multiple people trying to contact the customer or no one trying to contact the customer. There's different ways you can do it, but for the cover alert especially, and for every alert, you need to make sure that there's a defined recipient and a defined person who's responsible and taking action on it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And like I said, there's many different ways that companies choose to manage alerts once they get them, but you have to have a defined process and have people who are responsible for handling them. That was such a good point you just made about that the survey is essentially another touch point with your customer. We talked about touch points last week, and if you have this, you're going to the trouble and the lengths to write a survey, collect this feedback, if you're not responding to it, then you're really missing the mark, because it is essentially another touch point. So yeah, recover alerts are really important. And then I said we're going to talk about 3 today. I think the next one that we should talk about is a recognize alert. And so sort of turning this around, recover alerts are related to negative feedback. Recognize alerts are for positive experiences. We often ask the question, did anybody go above and beyond in your interaction with this company? And if the answer is yes, we ask them, what did they do? Can you tell us that story? Please explain it. And then we'll trigger a recognize alert. And that's so that we can recognize great experiences and stellar customer service. And usually it has to do with a person at your company who went above and beyond to help a customer. And you certainly want to be able to turn around and let your employee know that they were recognized by a customer and disseminate that information within your organization so others know that that particular employee was providing such great customer service.
Yeah, and I think the recognize alert has a lot of benefits, kind of both for customers and for the employees who it's recognizing. Because for folks who answer a survey, they want to talk about their negative experience, they want to talk about middling experiences, but they want to tell you if a good experience happened. So when you're giving them an opportunity to say, did someone go above and beyond for you? And if so, kind of who was it and what did they do? Customers really appreciate that opportunity to lay out in detail. Here's something great that happened that I really appreciate over this experience. And then being able to share that internally becomes very important as well. A kind of pitfall you can fall into with the survey program is just seeing it as this tool to really focus on the negative and really kind of beat up on where are we failing in our processes. But there's great work being done by employees every day. And you should communicate that to them through these surveys where we're able to say, we've collected this feedback on you specifically where customers called you out and we want to share that with you.
Yeah. And I have a number of customers who are using Recognize alerts now and sharing them in different ways. One of my customers has morning meetings with whoever's on shift that day. So every morning they will read any recognized alerts that have come in the last 24 hours. And it's just a really good way for them to start the day on a positive note, to recognize people who have been doing great work and to call out, hey, here are some happy customers and here's why. And I know that's been really impactful for that team and they all look forward to it.
Yeah, and we talked about in one of I believe our first employee experience PM Live session about a pay it forward program where the kind of customer facing employees were allowed to forward these recognize alerts to internal employees that they know had an impact. So it really is a great employee recognition tool that should be part of your employee recognition process. And these recover alerts do also serve a purpose beyond that individual employee engagement of getting an understanding of what is a great experience to our customers. So we will often do analysis of reading through these open-ended comments to create an understanding of when a customer says to us, we've had a great experience, what do they tend to speak to? And so you can really identify and train to and build towards those values that customers themselves tell you is above and beyond to them.
Yeah, and that's really important too. And once you have all that information, and especially looking at it in aggregate, you can then work to magnify those positive experiences that you're hearing about over and over again at the same time while you're working to diminish the negative experiences. So I think a lot of times people get caught up in VOC programs being about bad experiences, but there's this whole other side where if you're recognizing your employees and you're magnifying good experiences, that they can really add value to your organization as a whole. Okay, and then the third alert type that we should talk about today is the grow alert. And this is one that I've used across clients as well. Kirk, do you want to talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. And a grow alert is essentially asking the customer, are there any additional services that you would like for us to provide? It can take either just an open-ended question of them filling in kind of, here's what I would like to see. It can be a list of specific services that you provide where you're giving a customer a checklist. And the idea being, if there's some additional service that they are not currently using, you're giving them an opportunity to read through, see what it is that you offer and say, actually, yes, this is something I'm interested in. This is something I'm considering. And if they indicate that I'm interested in this service, that would then trigger an alert that commonly goes to a sales team or an account managers. It can, as we say, go to different folks, but someone who is responsible for growing an account. That way they can reach out to the customer and follow up.
That's something that's important too, that and we work with our customers very closely to determine who should receive what kind of alert, but it's not necessarily the same team. I had mentioned there was a centralized team at one of my clients handling recover alerts. That's not the same team who would handle the grow alert. So those might go to different places. Specifically with the grow alert too, process-wise, it's important to think about if a response triggers, say, a recover alert and a grow alert, you want to have a process in place so that you're managing those in the correct order. You don't want to reach out to somebody to talk about a sale if you haven't addressed whatever caused the recover alert. So we have been able to build in logic into some of our programs where we say, if it's a recover alert, make sure that is addressed first, and then send out the grow alert information to the correct team and they can handle it. I've seen some other interesting things with grow alerts, but go ahead, Kirk.
And I think that that's a great point, and I want to reiterate it as far as that your survey being another touch point, where if someone reaches out to you and says, I have a problem that's ongoing, and therefore, the recover alert is going to trigger from there, but also I am mindful of these other products I need, you don't want to follow with them first and try to sell them another product. It does come across as kind of tone deaf, not being very mindful of your needs. And it is where setting up a survey properly to be aware of kind of these steps that you need to hit, that becomes very important. So the process of acting on these alerts is just as important as kind of receiving them.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to think about the program holistically and how each part affects the other parts, and that's what we at PeopleMetrics would help you do, certainly, when setting up a program. Something else about the grow alerts that I've seen over the years is that they almost serve as, if you use the question to list out other services, they're a bit of an educational tool in that people might not have known that your company had these other options. For example, I worked with a cruise entertainment company, and they had a number of different types of cruises. And so people would take a cruise with them and then receive a survey and complete the survey. And the last question in the survey was, hey, do you want to learn any more about all these other types of cruises? And they would have a list. And when respondents said yes, they would actually send out brochures to them to give them more information about those other types of cruises. So it can be used that way as well, where people might not have known about something that your company was doing, and you can use it to let them know and then send them more information.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And there's a lot of ways you can integrate this in with how you're communicating your product offering to clients. That brochure is a great example. With clients that we have that are more kind of online and how they communicate with customers, we've had it set up where the end of the survey will redirect to whatever page describes the offering that they said they were interested in. So that way you're able to take customers, while it's top of mind for them, take them directly to this thing that you offer and that they've expressed interest in.
Yeah, so that redirect is when you're submitting the survey. Once you click the submit button, the next screen that you see, we can define that. And so customers can say, if you wanted to learn more about ABC cruise, you would be automatically landing on the page for that cruise, which is a great way to make it easy for your respondents to get more information about the thing that they said they were interested in.
One other thing, maybe a little kind of broader that applies to all these alerts that I want to note, another key reason to have alerts generally is that often, if it's a larger company especially, you might be collecting too much feedback to be reviewing every single instance of feedback. You might be getting thousands upon thousands of responses. And so it's just not practical for you to go through everyone. So the alerts are there to help you identify, here are the responses that you need to look at right away. You need to take a look at these and kind of identify and then take action on them. With these three that we're talking about, recover, that's very clear. You need to follow up on a poor experience, recognize you want to share that with the employee, and then grow. Of course, this is a sales opportunity that you need to be mindful of. Not to say that all survey feedback isn't important. You do want to review it all, but you need to be practical in how you act on these responses, and alerts are a way for you to prioritize.
Yeah, definitely a great way to prioritize. And I think what you said is important. Like each of these alerts, we have a reason for them. And then there are things that you can do once you receive them. You don't want to set an alert for just anything because it's not necessarily actionable. But in these instances, you know that there's something important happening. Is certainly with Recover, Recognize really helps to spread positive information within your organization, and then grow. Any chance that you have to grow your company is a good one, and should be looked at.
And even to that point, I think it's something that is essential for any successful voice of the customer program is adoption, is making sure the entire company sees it, has visibility into it, and understands the importance of it. So these alerts are very helpful in that way too, that you're able to kind of spread out and, you know, getting more visibility, because it is, as Audrey was just saying, important for the customer team, important for employee recognition, and important from a sales perspective. So that's just expanding the audiences that are aware of the feedback and the voice of the customer program.
That's true. And because it's going via email, you're able to put anybody who you might want to see these alerts on the email notification. And it doesn't mean they necessarily are the ones who need to manage it, but then they have visibility into, hey, we just received this response and either it was positive, or there's an opportunity, or there's a chance at recovery that needs to be taken here.
Definitely.
Okay. Well, I think we talked about the three most common types of alerts and why they're important. Maybe we can start talking about or check to see if there's any questions at this point.
Yeah, and I'm thanks guys for that. I think that was a great overview of the three different types of alerts that we commonly recommend. And actually, one of the questions here I've got, are these the only three kinds of alerts that you can use in a VOC program, or are there others that we could talk about?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I maybe touched on it a little bit, that you want to create an alert that is actionable and that is meaningful to you with the information that you're receiving. But there certainly are other types of alerts. An example of one is a supervisor alert. One of my clients says, would you like to be contacted by a supervisor? And if the respondent says yes, we trigger a supervisor alert that goes to that supervisor team and has them act on it. But really backing up a little bit, an alert can be triggered off of any survey response that you decide is important. So whatever the questions are in your survey, if there's one or two or three, whatever it is, that you think should trigger an alert, we can set it up. We did mention Recover alerts are triggered from detractors. And I do want to say we could have different triggers within the same survey for a Recover alert. So you could say, if you're a detractor, or if you said you had a problem, or if you want to be contacted by a manager, those could all trigger a Recover alert. And so we do have that flexibility to set it up that way.
And that actually has, I've got another question here about that too, which is, can you only trigger one kind of alert? Like, could you do only a cluster of Recover alerts within one survey, or is it possible to do like Recover and Recognize and Grow too, all in the same survey?
It's definitely possible to do them all within the one survey. Generally, I would say we recommend, if you are just starting your own program just now, you want to start with these two or three. Exactly as Audrey was saying, it's about what's important to you and what you really need to focus on. But we want to start with this Recover, Recognize, and Grow. Generally, those all do exist within the same survey. To the earlier question of can you have other types of alerts, another one I've seen is if you're trying to manage this differently with different departments. I've seen in kind of more B2B, complex B2B deliveries, you'll have a delivery team, a service team, a kind of repair team. And we've had surveys where depending on like what you speak to in the survey, these alerts are going to the separate team owners and they're kind of team alerts. So there's definitely a lot of different routes you can take, but you want kind of, you know, 2 or 3 alerts in your survey based on what's most important to you and how you're trying to grow from your program.
Yeah, and based on what you decide, you want to make sure that you're managing those alerts. And like Kirk said, could be going to different teams. So you really do have to have defined process as part of it.
That's great. And that sounds like, another question I'm seeing is just about who gets alerts, but it sounds to me like it's kind of however you design it, right? If you have your own centralized team of people that are handling alerts, or if it's going department by department, it sounds like it's a very, something that you have to define, obviously, as an organization.
Yeah, definitely. And I think to that, who should get the alerts? Generally, you want it going to, like, alerts are focused on action. They're focused on, this is something that requires follow-up, requires some immediate process. So they should go to the people who are responsible for that process. You don't want it going to a lot of people, since they're generally sent by email. You don't want them going to a lot of people because you don't want a lot of people either thinking they're responsible for it and kind of having redundant communications. Also, you don't want to be cluttering people's inboxes and having them just tune it out. So commonly it would just be whoever's responsible, and then perhaps their supervisor, so they can keep track of it. But that's the people who should get the alerts are the ones who are acting on it and responsible for it.
But I think you brought up a good point, Madeline, that it really is dependent upon the way the organization is built as to what's going to work best for them. And it depends on the type of survey, and are they B2B or B2C. But we've seen a lot of different things, from a centralized team to, say, a branch manager or a store manager who manages the alerts, or it could be an account manager. And what we at PeopleMetrics would talk about the options with you, really try to understand how your business is set up and what will add the most value, and then make recommendations based on that to set up a successful program.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking at the time and I see it's almost 2:30. So I want to just thank everyone for your time. Kirk and Audrey, thank you so much for this conversation. I certainly learned a lot about all the different ways we can do an alert setup in our survey programs. And I really like what you said about the fact that follow-up is a touch point, right? Like I've certainly taken surveys before for my phone company or whatever it is. And if I have a negative or positive experience, a lot of times I'm expecting to hear something back. So that acts as its own touch point for an interaction with the company. And I also love what you said about the fact that you can use recognize alerts not only to train, not only to recognize employees, which is awesome, but also as a training tool to say, these are the best practices. This is the best stuff that we're having, that our employees are doing. And we want to replicate that behavior and recruit that way and train that way. So I think that's just an awesome other example of how to use a recognize alert. So thank you, everyone. We're wrapping up here, and thank you for joining us for PeopleMetrics Live today. If you have any colleagues or friends that couldn't make it to this session, no worries. There are recordings of PeopleMetrics Live always available on our PeopleMetrics YouTube channel. And you can also check us out on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also, if you want more customer experience content, look at our blog. That's at peoplemetrics.com/blog for even more content from us. And if you're really ready to take a deep dive on customer experience measurement, I highly recommend checking out our founder and CEO, Sean McDade's book. It's called Listen or Die, 40 Lessons That Turn Customer Feedback into Gold. And you can get that on Amazon. They have Kindle and paperback version, however you want to read that. That's a great read, and a quick one too, I should add. Like I said earlier, we have one more session of PeopleMetrics Live coming up this Thursday, the 19th, where we'll be sharing some ideas on how to creatively recognize employees this year without spending a ton of money. Speaking of recognizing employees, that'll definitely be a good one. So you can sign up for that at peoplemetrics.com/events. And on that page, you can also see recordings of previous sessions. And those are also on our YouTube channel if you want to check them out there. So thank you again. We love hearing from all of you, so please keep sending us your questions about customer and employee experience at peoplemetrics.com/contact, and we'll look to answer those in upcoming sessions. So thank you all very much for your time and for joining us today, and we hope you have a great rest of your week.